This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Sound Porter Mastering, OWC, Atom Audio, API Audio, Jay-Z Microphones, Spectra 1964, and iZotope. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now through the Jay-Z pop filter on the Jay-Z BB29 microphone, through the Spectra 1964 STX600 mic pre-complimenter, and iZotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC Mercury Extreme Pro 6G SSD. So get ready to rock.
Not every mix comes up and is a happy mix. There's some that are unbelievably challenging. It is stressful. You get angry. I will get up, slam the desk, I'll walk out and I'll get it out. I'll just get really, really pissed off because I'm not getting it, which is why I'm getting angry. You have to let yourself do that. Then come back and sit down and try it again.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio.
When I master a song, I'm immersed and committed to its sonic fidelity from start to beyond finished. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. My goal in every master is to help you prepare so that you're not compromising your timeline, budget, or your mix. My iterative process helps build a relationship with you so that you don't have to ever second-guess your mix. Let's pull back the curtains on mastering because there's no secrets here. Send me your mix and I'll give you free feedback or a free mastered demo. Just hit me up at soundporter.com.
Whether you're in the studio or working remotely, the Envoy Pro FX from OWC lets you record from anywhere with confidence, pushing USB technology bandwidth to the max of 2,800 megabytes per second over Thunderbolt. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you anywhere you go. Built for the road, the OWC Envoy Pro FX is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Find the new Envoy Pro FX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Jay-Z Mics brings you the ultimate futuristic pop filter for your studio, built from solid metal parts that won't break and a flexible gooseneck for easy placement. The Jay-Z pop filter uses a unique waveguide design that prevents plosives from getting through to the mic while allowing important high frequencies for clarity. Plus, it looks super cool and you're hearing my voice on it right now. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 20% off this amazing pop filter from jzmic.com. Hey Rockstars, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to the show. I'm super excited today because we have an incredible guest joining us. Michael Brauer is on podcast episode 300. However, I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of a disclaimer. I was traveling at the time of this interview, and the only way I could do this and reach Michael at the right time is if I joined him from my hotel room while I was traveling. So I brought my laptop with me, set it all up, got everything ready. We even sound checked it over Skype to make sure that we were good to go. And then we had to restart Skype for some reason. And lo and behold, Skype decided to switch my mic back to the built-in laptop microphone. So unfortunately, you're going to hear my voice sounding a little distant, but I don't think it'll matter. I think it's still going to be a great episode, and I hope you guys really enjoy it. And I just wanted to give you a heads up and say thanks so much for listening. Cheers. Hey, Rockstars, it's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Michael Brauer, a multi-Grammy-winning New York mix engineer. His Medi credits include Best Pop Vocal Album for John Mayer's Continuum, Best Alternative Album for Coldplay's Parachutes, and also Best Rock Album for Coldplay's Viva la Vida or Death and All His Friends. Other credits include the Rolling Stones, Aerosmith, Jeff Buckley, David Byrne, Paul McCartney, Ben Folds, Willie Nelson, KT Tunstall, Martha Wainwright, and more recently projects include Zac Brown Band, Hootie and the Blowfish, Michael Kiwanuka, Slash, and the Courteeners. Beginning at MediaSound Studios in New York City in 1976, Michael worked his way up from the shipping department to staff engineer, assisting the hottest guys in town, including Bob Clearmountain, Mike Barbiero, Ron St. Germain, Michael DeLugg, Ed Stasium, Godfrey Diamond, Tony Bongiovi, and Harvey Goldberg. He became Luther Vandross's engineer, recording all his music for 4 years, including 2 Aretha Franklin albums, and spent half of the 80s making records in London in their exploding music scene, finally returning home to the US to focus on the American scene after 1990. And in 2018, Michael opened Brauerizing Studios in New York City's Chelsea area. At the new studio, he began utilizing a hybrid mixing setup for the first time in his career, making the mixing process more powerful and efficient. He's also known for creating the technique known as Brauerizing, in which mixes are routed through multiple compressors and buses to create a blended sound. And he is the co-founder of Mix with the Masters, which has been running for over a decade. Thank you also to Randy Fuchs at Artist Relations and OWC for helping to make our introduction. Very excited to have you here. Please welcome Michael Brauer to Recording Studio Rockstars. Michael, are you ready to rock, dude?
I believe so.
Glad to have you here, man. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Tell us a little bit about, where you are. I know you have built a studio in 2018 in New York, but I think you are this year in more of a home studio setup or a combination of the two. Is that right?
No, I'm strictly up here for the foreseeable future. I always had a place up in the Catskills and had a really nice basement that always sounded good, but I didn't have any. I would play my music down here. I had a big record collection, but I wasn't doing anything beyond that. I kept the studio and the home very separate. And then come March, when it became obvious that we had a pandemic, global pandemic, and that New York City was really just becoming a really hot zone, I moved pretty much everything that was that I could do in the box and a few analog pieces of gear, which like my Binson and some other delays, and brought all that up and set up a studio in my basement. And I have to say, probably I'm lucky as can be. But when I started playing my, some music through the system, it sounded great in here. And so I was like, this is probably the first room I didn't have to have an acoustician in and to fix things up, And it's like, it's a
cool looking room.
It's really, really cool. I used to have, I still do. I had awards down here and it was fun, just to put them up, and the kids liked it and my kids' friends liked it. So I left it up. And as it turns out, between the absorption of the flooring, I had this special kind of cork tile and the wraparound couch and a low wooden ceiling, beautiful wooden ceiling, and the wainscoting that's also wood. Then it's evened out with the brightness of the glass from the awards. And I have a record collection behind my speakers, and that's absorbing certain parts of the mid-range. All in all, it sounds really good. So I'm fortunate.
Right on. Hey, Rockstars, I thought I'd give a shout out. Michael and I discovered that we were going to switch his microphone input. So if the sound changes, that's just because we made a little switch in the middle of the interview. Yeah, I love the look of the wood, all the wood paneling in there. And it kind of looks like the space you're working in now looks like the kind of place you'd discover your love for music in the first place, just listening to records.
That's very true. There's just, it just has a really, really good vibe. And I never thought I'd want a place where I'd be, in the same house, the house and the studio. But, I mean, with what's going on out there, this turned out great, and I love it. I mean, I can just head upstairs for quick lunch if I want. I don't have to go across town. I don't have to order out. It's ideal. It's interesting what you can do when you're put in a situation that you have very little control over, where you need to escape one situation, which was the city and its it's virus and disease, and find some place where you're going to be a bit safer.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the process, what do you make of it? And I think I made some really interesting discoveries, and I took advantage of this situation that I wouldn't have otherwise done. I wouldn't have moved up here if I didn't feel that I had to. And in the process, I really discovered my skills got way better for mixing in the box, to the point where after about 4 or 5 months, I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't miss all my hardware. I mean, the hardware that I do miss, I haven't had a chance to bring it up here yet, but the things that I immediately had to bring, it's like when people say, what would you take with you on an island? It'd be my Benson. So I got my Benson delay, and I've got my custom Watkins delay, and there's a few other things that are in storage that I'll bring up here.
And are those both analog tape delays, or I remember
the Benson is technically not a tape; it's a drum.
Right.
It's a steel drum that turns, and it's got a wire on it. And the Watkins is a multi-headed tape delay. Yeah.
Yeah, Watkins makes some really cool stuff. I have one of their Dominator WEM 2 guitar amps that just sounds like $1 million.
Charlie modified this one for me. It's called the Copycat. It's a nice big one, and he did some beautiful stuff to it when he was still alive, and I love it. I love it. And of course, my son loves it too, so he's always trying to grab it from me.
So as you can imagine, majority of our audience are mixing from home studios of one sort or another as well. And so I'm sure people will be really curious to hear more about your experiences with that stuff that you felt like you discovered. I don't know where to begin. I mean, maybe where would you like to begin with that? I mean, were there some initial things that you remember thinking, oh, this is going to be a little bit challenging, before you discovered that it was much easier than you expected?
Well, let's backtrack a little bit. When I was at Electric Lady for 9 years, almost 10 years, my main room, I had stopped recording many, many years ago. So what did I do with the live room? Well, I turned the live room basically into a second room. And eventually, originally it was just a lounge. And then I started thinking, boy, I really need to learn how to go hybrid. And I had some really good friends who helped me get that way, which was Nico Bolas and Tony Maserati. And they really, just kind of helped me figure out how to get that started. And I was going to replace the SSL, and then everything else I was going to maintain as my hardware. So all my Brauerizing, the whole ABCD thing was going to be maintained, and I purchased the same gear that I had in the main room, and it was a matter of learning what that sweet spot would be on a control surface, which at the time was just remember their little artist, well, they still have it, but the artist mix.
Mm-hmm.
It was a generation before the S1 and the S6. And so it took me a long time, literally. I mean, it took me a good year, because it was really a scary experience. I knew I had to do it, but it was scary. And so I knew I had the SSL to draw on, and that was going to be my main. And the hybrid was more kind of like, I'll get to it when I get to it. It's just kind of a backup. And there'd be times where I would try to do it, and it just sounded awful. I didn't know what I was doing, and I'd leave it alone for a month or something. And then my assistant would go, come on, Michael, get back in here. Try it again. Steve Bealey. The original person who started the template was Ryan Gilligan, who was Steve's teacher. And Ryan Gilligan was really instrumental on setting up a template to match what I had in my room. So I said, look, when I open up this session, I want to see everything exactly like I do on the SSL. All my sends, my buses, everything. I want everything grouped to 8. Everything has to be identical. And now we got to find, I just got to figure out the calibration and where is the sweet spot when the analog desk isn't the point of where you find your sweet spot. So it's going to have to be in my ABCD. How hard am I pushing that? And that took, a good year and a half. And then eventually there was a point where I was mixing the Marmozets, their second album, and one song I just couldn't nail on the desk. I mean, I just couldn't nail, period. And it got to the point even where another engineer had a shot at it, and the label was like, yeah, this is definitely what we're looking for. And the band was like, oh, Michael, try it again. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to try it in the hybrid. And I just discovered that I was able to dig deeper and go crazier on the hybrid setup, and I nailed it. And they were like, wow. And that was, it's all about confidence. And I didn't have that confidence until I did something on it that turned out to be better than what I could have done on the SSL or analog desk, period. And that gave me the confidence. I was like, you know what? I can do this. And that really started the point where I was like, maybe I'll mix another record on here. And what I ended up doing was I was doing these little side projects that have very small budgets. I would mix those in a hybrid. And that's not to say that, well, now it could have been better if I was on the SSL, but the SSL had my main client, the gigs on that. And so that desk was always up and ready to go. And then if I'd be waiting for comments, I'd go into the hybrid room and I'd be mixing these little projects. And so they were getting a good deal. They were unsigned artists. They were getting a great deal. And I was learning to get better and better at it. So then when I decided to leave Electric Lady and go to another studio, that studio started off as the hybrid. So the main room became the hybrid, and I got myself a beautiful Avid S6 that looked very much like a console. It doesn't heat up and doesn't smell like a console, but it certainly looks like a console, and it was fun. I mean, it was just a great fun.
The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 comp limiter, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. But what if you want to record direct keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the stereo BBDI 2 with custom wound high Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad at spectra1964.com. You may already know that iZotope creates the very best smart plugins for mixing and mastering. But did you know that now you can get them all through iZotope's new affordable subscription bundles? Get Music Production Suite Pro for only $24.99 per month, or Producers Club for only $19.99 per month. Start your 7-day free trial subscription now, or go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscriptions or Spire Studio. The S6, it costs as much as a car, but you don't have to put as much gas into it.
exactly.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing
the electric bill is a lot less. So
yeah, really.
And then I completely reconfigured my rack so that one big rack had the A, B, C, D, and then also I decided that I would sound if I'm going to replace the desk. I go, why not get 4 different sounding consoles across my A, B, C, D, so that the A goes through a different mixer, and B goes through a different mixer. So I end up doing that, and that really created a really cool. Let me think now. I had the Chandler, Chandler mixer on B, and I had the I had the Neve mixer on A, and I had C was Paul Wolf designed it. It was before it was right after. What is it? It's so obvious. I can see it in my head.
Not one of the APIs.
It has a sound of an API, but it was his own. It'll come to me probably after the broadcast. But anyway, I used Paul Wolf's, and he customized it for me a little bit. And so I had all these, and then I had the Bomber, I think, I should have done my homework before I started all this.
Was that the
Burl?
Yeah, the
Burl.
Right.
And so I did all of that, and it was really cool setup. And so I had different sounds going. It wasn't just a sound like of an SSL. It's like I had an SSL, I had a Trident, I had an API, And so that was my main room. And then the live room was strictly all in the box. And we had, during this time, I had my assistant Fernando figuring out how to emulate my ABCD, because by this point, UAD was coming out with a really good sounding Neve, and they had the distressor, although they didn't have the British setting, which they still don't, but I think that's going to change pretty soon, because that was very important to the sound of the distressor, is that little toggle switch you put in and out,
Yeah.
And and so I was able to find stuff between them and Plug-in Alliance. And Plug-in Alliance, I ended up really liking their SSL 4000. I mean, there's 4 or 5 different companies doing, making that, and they all sound good. It's just what vibes, right? And
right.
I tried them all, and the one that just vibed for me was Plug-in Alliance's version. And then, of course, once I liked it, I always like to get hold of the designer right away. It was the same like with the distressor. When I first heard that, I called up David Durr and I said, "Hey, let's become friends."
Well, Dave's an easy guy to become friends with. Cool. What a cool
exactly.
Dude.
And so with the plugin, I was like, wow, who's making this? This is so musical to me. And I think maybe that's what I was attracted to. Not that the other ones weren't, but this one was exceptionally vibey to me. And so I got to know the 2 guys, the 2 brothers, Kirk and Dave and Mark. And I was like, okay, listen, building a 9000. Oh yeah, we're working on it. I was like, how soon? I was being politely annoying.
Yeah, you're like, I'm ready to use it. Yeah, sorry, you were like, I'm ready to use the thing.
Yeah, I'm ready to use it, and and I like the 4000, but I have had a 9000 for the last 10, 15 years, and I really want the 9000. That EQ and compressor is just so different than the 4000. They go, okay, well, we're working on it. And 3 or 4 months later, I write them, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's that 9000? I think like a year and a half, 2 years go by, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And then finally they said, hey, I think we have a beta ready for you. So about 2-3 months later, they sent me one, and I was like, wow, this is great. And I found an SSL that, to make sure that it sounded like theirs. And I did just a couple of little tweaks suggested. Otherwise, they had nailed it. And then I made a whole batch of presets. And so when you go to the 9000, all of those down the center section, those are all mine.
Oh, cool.
Although some of them should have been multi-mono, but I didn't realize that they can't do that because it's only waves that allow you to do multi-mono. So I think I've been pushing them on the forum or something to make available the exact ones that I had, because the piano settings were mostly multi-mono. They're very different from the left to the right. But anyway, I was so happy, and that's what goes across every channel. Whether I use it or not, everything goes through, just like my SSL. I mean, I loved SSL. I was not going to get rid of it, at least from a sound line, and so by having that across all the channels, and then sometimes I might go, wow, I wonder what it would sound like if it was a Neve desk instead. And I might just switch everything up and put the Plugin Alliance Neve across everything. That's what's so amazing. That's what I love about this new process, is that you can change consoles. And I know the sound of the Neve. I grew up on the Neve 8068 at MediaSound. And I know the sound of Trident, and I know the sound of Helios. I know, I don't know Trident and Helios as well as I know API, Neve, and SSL, SSL4, SSL6, SSL8, SSL9. I know all of those. I know the feel. I know what I can get out of those. So it's really exciting. And then to experiment and go, gee, I wonder what it would sound like if it was Helios across. And, I mixed one record where I just couldn't get the sound right. And I took UAD's Helios and UAD's Trident, and I put it across all the channels. Not both on each channel, but on certain channels it was Trident, and other channels it was Helios. And it made such a huge difference. And I was like, man, this I couldn't have done. I couldn't have done this on the analog desk. So, I mean, I could have, in the sense that I could have put it across the inserts, on the tracks, on Pro Tools, I guess technically, but still everything is bottlenecking right into the SSL. So whatever I was trying to do differently is still going to be affected by the beautiful sound of the SSL.
So can I ask you a question about that? You're describing sort of the beauty of having these options that might have been impossible before. And, you probably do know a lot about choosing options and how to make a choice. What are some of the things that you want to share about, the way to not get overwhelmed by options? Because you sound excited about having those options, whereas somebody else might be like, I'm listening to this, I don't know which one's better. This one's good, but that one's good too.
Well, just like I did with hardware, and I've done with software, you don't overwhelm yourself. There's a million plugins out there, and it's just too much, and then what? Well, Chad Blake uses, this compressor, and Chris uses these compressor plugins, and, you can go on and on with each different mixer using, their plugins and their favorite plugins, and you'll go crazy because they all make great sounding record. That doesn't mean that you using their plugin is going to give you anything. So the best thing to do, as I did with hardware, for those of you who know, the legend of my racks behind me, or used to be behind me, I didn't start with 6 racks. I started with a Pultec and a Neve 33609. But when I was at Media, we didn't have many options yet. So there was the LA3A, the LA2A, the Roger Mayer, and maybe the Dynamo, the 1176s, and that kind of was about it. We didn't have Fairchilds, so I never knew what that was about. And then we had a few EQs, and that was it. So what happened? You learn those, you know, intimately. I mean, you know exactly what they sound like on anything and everything. Why? Because you try it on anything and everything. And it was the same thing when I started with plugins. I'm like, oh, there's thousands here. I'm not, I'm going to learn the ones that interest me right off the get-go. And I would use them on everything, and I would push them to the point where I could hear what happens when they get into the crap out mode, which today now they've designed some of these plugins so they don't do that digital crap out. They actually saturate the way the analog version would have, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so, but I got to learn to the point because as I grew my collection of hardware, I grew it because they each offered something different, and it was mostly about tone. I preferred using compressors without compressing as a tone instead of EQ, because it was just the tone was so much more natural. It's not a filter, it was a compressor, was just whatever the makeup in that thing was with the tubes and the iron and everything. And I didn't necessarily have to have it compressing at all. And it was just great. But I got to associate all the different EQs that I had and different compressors with what I was looking for when I was wanting a bass to articulate a certain way, or a vocal. A vocal might be really harsh, and I would kind of scan through all my gear. And as I'm scanning through it, all these little sounds are popping up in my head. It's almost like two thumbprints. You've got the thumbprint, and now you're scanning through the FBI file, trying to see the one that matches. And in this case, it's like, well, this thumbprint, needed a little bit more warmth on it. And
makes it so good they're criminal.
Yeah, and I keep going through all the hardware, and then poof, they'd be like that one piece of gear, like, that should sound great on this vocal. And I'd put it on, and 99% of the time, that's exactly what I was looking for. Why? Because I knew that piece of gear, everything about it. So it didn't become a piece of gear; it became a tool to address an issue or to enhance something. It was nothing more than that, and I think too many people get hung up on, even with the hardware, but, with a plugin, like, I got to have the whole collection, but you don't spend enough time learning what each one of those really, really does. And so that's, to address your question, that was, important that I started doing that, because I have a friend of mine who would call me and goes, hey, and he would start talking about 3 or 4 more new plugins that I had just figured out what sounded good, and then he would throw like 4 or 5 at me, and I'd get so intimidated, and I go, David, stop it. I have to go now. It's like, I don't want to know I have to learn 4 more. It was just too much. It was too much. And so I was like, I can't do it like this. I just got to do one at a time.
Well, it's encouraging because it kind of points out that there's more opportunity for us if we don't go, if we just focus on the stuff we've got for a little while. And I remember that when I built my home studio and I stopped buying gear. I spent the first decade, I was just, everything I earned, I just went to eBay and bought something. And then the second decade was like, all right, can't buy any more stuff, so I'll use what I got. And I felt like I improved tremendously just using what I got in that time,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really the best way to do it. You just find something and use it on and only that, just use it on everything. You'll discover great things about it, and you'll discover that it sounds great. And then you get to learn what that tool does. Why, what does it address well? What does it not address so well? And then that'll stay in your memory bank instead of constantly trying something, on one instrument and never again. I mean, it's just, I mean, that's the way I am. I don't like to be so overwhelmed. It's just scary. So.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that once you have your tools in place, I mean, you talked about getting in the zone when you're mixing and stop, being able to stop thinking about the tools and start just getting in the zone and just being playful with the music.
Yeah, I've never looked at when I'm mixing at something like, ooh, how do I execute that idea? I just do. So you need to have all of that. And if it's something that I need to start learning, that's a plug-in, I'll learn it to the point where I don't have to think about it anymore. And just the way I'm scanning through my hardware, I can be scanning through software. And I have a whole favorites list that pops up of all the favorite gear in Pro Tools. I can just go up and I can just see the main stuff that I like to use. And then if there's something else, I'll just scan through it and a bunch of it, I have no idea what it is. And then there's stuff I'm looking for. I mean, that's how I discovered the black box in Plugin Alliance. I was actually looking for something and I thought I selected it. And you know how sometimes you just let go a little too soon?
Yeah.
And up pops some plugin you had no idea it was. That's what happened with the black box. And I was like, what is this? I didn't even know that there was a hardware version of black box, and so I started playing with it. I was like, wow, this is so cool. And it was strictly by accident. I mean, you look at Plugin Alliance and you go like, what are all these other things they got? And as I'd start, diving in there and seeing, what do you got here? What's this? And that's exciting, and there's Soft Tube like that, or Toy Factory, or PSP. There's just so many of these great companies.
Yeah.
Along with, of course, Waves and UAD, and I'm probably going to piss somebody off because I haven't mentioned them. But I go through it and I just I start having fun. If I'm in a discovery mode where I'm just looking for a new idea, a new something, then I'll sit there and I'll just try. Well, what else they got here to offer, and then I'll just open it up and I'll go, nah. Oh, this is interesting. What's this?
You allow yourself that freedom during an actual mix as opposed to just, at a different time or something?
If I'm in a discovery mode where I want to find the time to come up with something very fresh or something different, generally when I get the music, those ideas are very well established. They've been recorded and printed. And I don't need to be searching for anything because they've already presented it. But there are times where I'm like, this could really use something different. I'm like, what kind of different? I don't know yet. Well, let's find something different that I don't know yet. and then, who knows? And when you're not expecting anything, that's when you can find something really, really cool. And so, avoid the go-to in certain situations. I want something different, but I don't know what. All right, well, never even opened up. Let's see what they do. And then I'll do, because I'm making the time to that. I'm more in a discovery mode. If I'm mixing and I want to do, I just don't want to, I just want to mix and I just want to let it go and just close my eyes and do what I usually do. Then, everything is I've already set everything up that I wanted to, and now I just go for it. But, if I'm looking for discovery, I'm going to take that time to discover. And then when I like it, then I'm going to go back into my mode of just mixing and not thinking about much of anything, just feeling where the music takes me.
If you're ready to upgrade your studio to the famous sound of API's large format consoles, then you're ready for the Box, a small format console featuring the same analog circuitry and original 2520 op-amp design that has made API famous for 50 years. Record through 8 world-class mic pre-channels, mix through 24 smooth-as-glass faders, and upgrade your home studio to legendary status. API now offers a virtual console experience, allowing you to get a personalized online demo of the Box at apiaudio.com. Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class studio for professional mixing and mastering. Their unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design is famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear into your music, allowing you to focus on the mix. Learn how to set up your studio monitors and control room for great sound, plus lots of other cool studio tips at atom-audio.com/education. Do you have any other tips on capturing that moment of I like it? I think, you must have experienced this at some point, and I think we all do, where we're like, I like this, but maybe there's something better. Maybe I should keep looking and see if there's something better. And I feel like sometimes I miss opportunity by not deciding that if I like it, that's good. Move on.
Well, then you're introducing real thought, and overthinking on. I keep looking for something till I go, oh, that makes me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's good enough. It's making me feel good. That's good enough. If later, when everything is done, and I go back and I go, that was good at the time, but maybe I could express it a little bit better. Then I'll search. But if you start doing that with everything, you're not going to get anywhere, because then you're thinking, I'm just going by impulse and just responding to what's coming at me. And I'm very, very fast on just moving. And why? Because before I start the mix, I'm listening to the song, I'm listening to the rough mix, and subconsciously I'm thinking about what is the emotion that I want to get from this song. Where are we going? Is this an angry song? Is this a happy song, but there's a tinge of anger or a tinge of sadness or a tinge of regret? What's the bridge? What's going on in the bridge? Is that supposed to be, it's sounding happy, but I don't think it should be as happy as the rough is giving it. And so I know the direction from an emotional standpoint of where I want to go. And then that drives my decision making, because you could sit there and spend way too much time getting 5 different guitar sounds. Like, oh, this one is really good. And then you put another one and you go, well, this one is really good too. Yeah, I could do that all day long. What's the result of that? The result is you're going to be tired and you don't know what to do. And what it's good according to what? Is it good according to that this guitar is sounding angry for this song? Because it might be, if you go, yeah, this sounds good, but is it appropriate for the song? Is it too clean? Is it too dirty? Is it too muddy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, all those are being dictated by what's the emotion that I'm trying to envision, that I'm trying to bring out here. That's the right guitar sound. And that's it. And that's as far as I think about it. I go, this sounds angry enough. Oh, can I make it angrier? Can I make it cleaner? I don't give a fuck. I'm done. It feels good. All right, move on. I may address it later if it's too angry or too distorted. I'll deal with it. But right now, it feels good. What about the drum sound? All right, does this song need to bounce? Is this more of a backbeat feel or is it a downbeat feel? And so if I'm focusing too much on the kick, on the downbeat, and I'm listening to the rough and it's really more of a backbeat, it's like the 2 and the 4, and I'm focused on it so that it sounds more like a 1 and 3, that's not good. That's changing the groove of the song too much. If it's supposed to bounce, and I'm making it too heavy, all right, these are all the things that naturally, well, what do I need? This is too heavy. I want it to bounce more. And so you push knobs, you do stuff, and you EQ, and then there's a point where you go, this is bouncing just nice. I like this feel. Okay, we're good. Move on.
Do you ever find yourself concerned as far as, you've learned ways to do things, you've learned techniques for arriving at results. Do you ever hit a point where you feel like you're being derivative of your own work? And is that a concern, or is that kind of a who cares moment as well, because you're just focusing on the music and what the music needs?
Well, I addressed that many, many years ago by changing a good portion of my style every 5 years.
Yeah, and you just did it again.
I basically abandoned my go-tos in order to move towards a new style of music. If I want somebody, when I was doing R&B, starting with Change and Luther and Aretha and James Brown, all those records were slick, polished R&B pop. They sounded great. They were tight. But eventually, I wanted to be doing something that was more rock orientated, and which led me eventually to mix the Stones, and that wasn't good. That approach doesn't work. So I started figuring out, and it's it is scary, and you have to meet that and accept that it's going to be scary, and that's okay. Just give yourself time. I mean, I would give myself time to think about, well, where am I going next? What's something that's interesting that is just a different approach, a different style of music? And then, I take my time about that. I might take 6 months thinking about that. And then I go, oh, you know what? This is what I want to do next. And then I start gravitating towards getting 1 or 2 songs, that is appropriate for this new approach. And then the new approach means that my go-tos are not going to work. There's a slick, the tight. That's no good. You got to get raw. Okay, well, what's raw? How do you get raw? I haven't done raw. How do you get grainy? I haven't done grainy. You give yourself the time to do it. And then eventually, and you're thinking constantly, this is kind of the record I want to do. This is the band I want to do. And I mean, a lot of this is also, visualizing something that you want next. And then kind of falls into place because that's what you're imagining. That's what you want. And you just have to be patient with it. But you can't sit there and going, well, this style that I did, and look at these gold records. This band's going to like what I did. No, they're not going to like what you did. What you're doing is sounding like slick. And what they want is unslick. So that's not going to work. How's that going to happen? Well, you have to change. You have to adapt. As a mixer, we're constantly having to change at the same rate that the music is, and technology, of course, right? So it's not like you get success and you go, okay, I'm done. I think I'll retire in my mode because it's successful. And that won't last long.
Yeah. Well, so let me, if it's all right with you, maybe I'll pivot to a couple of questions from the rock stars. I shared your Spotify playlist, which we put together of your discography in Facebook, and so we got a bunch of questions about it. And Rockstars, I want to remind you that in the show notes for the podcast, you can click through, and there will be a playlist of many of the great records that Michael's worked on. So please go listen. You dig it. Let's see. Here's a first comment. Is actually comes in from Bjorgvin Benediktsson. He just said he wants to send you a copy of his new book because he wrote a book called "You Get What You Give," inspired by the New Radicals song that you mixed, which he mentioned in the book and mentioned you as well. So that wasn't really a question. That was just a shout out.
Great.
Okay, so here's one from Daniel Hulsinger. He says, I'd love to know how you teach EQ. Everybody talks about compression, but carving space and proper EQ is something that doesn't get asked a lot. And then Thomas Doherty follows up with that saying, particularly mids, please. Spend an entire hour just talking about the mids. Any thoughts on EQ there?
You see, to ask me to teach about EQ is contrary to everything that I try to teach, which is you're trying to bring out an emotion, right? And so what is the emotion? For me, there's basically, to me, there's four basic emotions that, and then there's subgroups of all of that and combinations. But you either have the happy, or the sad, or the angry, or the physical, like club. That's basically it. Where the point of the club is to get you up and dancing, not to be thinking, just to be moving. And if you've got a mix that's supposed to be doing that, and you're not even tapping your foot, you're not doing a good job. And if the song is supposed to be angry, like listen to a Marmoset record that I've done. Listen to System Error, right? I mean, that to me is just that wonderful, angry, throw it in your face approach, but it's still musical. It's still musical, and the sad. I mean, kind of hope, but with a sadness in it, like Coldplay, Yellow, or other ones with Fix You. These are all. How am I mixing those? All I'm thinking about is how can I express this message? How can I express this song? At no point do I think about EQ. The EQ is a result of my wanting to express that. And now, okay, mid-range. Mid-range excites the ears, right? And if you do too much, it hurts the ears. But if you do it just right, it's exciting that part of the song that is so expressive. You've got the bottom end that needs to balance out, and you got the top end that needs, but the mid-range, for me, I remember that the best music when I was growing up came from England. The British sound, if you think about the British sound, it was all about what was going on in the mid-range and the extreme dynamics of what was going on. And it would always be one thing, one instrument or another. It could be a crazy loud tambourine, or this reverb on a vocal, or an incredible delay on a guitar. But it's so pronounced and mid-rangey, right? And clear, not muddy, but clear and just exploding. It was so dynamic, so emotional. And that's what stuck with me. And when I started going to England and I wanted to mix, British music, I had a great American bottom as a bass, and which, the bottom end, England loved, and they just absolutely loved it. But I loved the sound of what the British were doing. And so I always combine the two, because I finally got to mix, they're still making records. They were still making records, with those kind of really cool elements going on in the mid-range. And I would just pump it up, because it was so exciting. The more mid-range I got it, the more excitement that was created, but it was being balanced by my R&B bottom end that I had learned from at MediaSound, the East Coast approach, as opposed to the West Coast. And so it was a beautiful combination, because I was happy. I was getting to actually mix the kind of music that I was loving so much. It wasn't necessarily the same band, but their whole culture, I just dived in. I was loving it. And I was very successful at it because of it, because they could see that I got it. And so when you say, talk about EQ, well, you take the EQ and I would do things where, and this is as technical as I'm going to get, is where I would just take the gain and go all the way to the right, which normally is boost. And then I would just scan through the EQ, because they're all parametric now. And you hear, and I would almost always have the Q as wide as possible. Otherwise, it just sounds like, right? And I have nice and wide, and I would I would be playing something, but not in solo. It's within, as I'm building things up. Because in solo, what does it mean? It means nothing. You're in a vacuum. How does it relate to the song, the instruments around you, right? I think the only time I ever solo is when I hear a problem and I'm trying to figure out what the problem is, or there's just something. It's more of trying to discover what's going on, or maybe I'm trying to memorize because part of the string line I can't really hear. So I solo it and then I'll compress it so I could hear that really cool little, crescendoing line going into a chorus, which I couldn't hear before. So, those are things that drive me. And then I, when it feels good, then I go, okay, I'll move on. And again, it's still in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, what is approach? What is the emotional, goal here? And so I'm not really thinking, but I'll just go back and forth. And then maybe sometimes I'll do the opposite. I'm like, wow, there's something that sounds too muddy. I might just go the other way. I'll attenuate. And then I'll just scope through, the lower mid-range and see whether this sound now clears up. It's kind of, remember when we were talking with Sylvia and David on that WC, and she goes, and sometimes I'll put a smile on a mix, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. A smile, and that smile is like taking out, a bit of the lower mid-range and just kind of letting it smile. I love her. She's so cool. So, and again, but that's it. That's the one and only lesson. The EQ is just the same thing as why I'm scanning through different pieces of gear. It's just like, what am I looking for? What's going to make me feel better? And that's it. And then I stop once. I feel better now. Okay, good. Well, for now, this is good. I may look at it again later, but you have to trust your gut.
iZotope is a secret weapon for your studio that can help you get consistently pro-sounding mixes. And now you can get access to all their plugins through the new subscription options. Only $24.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and much more, including free plugin updates. Or for only $19.99 per month, you can join Producers Club to get a suite of industry-leading production, mixing, and mastering plugins, custom presets, royalty-free samples, production courses, and more. Start your 7-day free trial subscription now or go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscriptions or Spire Studio. The Spectra 1964 Custom Shop now offers the STX-100D, the big brother to the now famous STX-100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer-isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX-100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 comp limiter, then check out the new STX600 modules, combining the STX100 mic pre and C610 in a single 500 module. That's how you're hearing my voice. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's, BBDI, and comp limiters. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Whether you're in the studio or working remotely, the Envoy Pro FX from OWC lets you record from anywhere with confidence. It pushes USB technology bandwidth to the max of 2,800 megabytes per second over Thunderbolt, giving you high-speed audio data and recording and playback. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you anywhere you go. Built for the road, the OWC Envoy Pro FX is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Creativity connectivity without limits, only from OWC. Imagine never having to worry about your external drive interface again or compatibility from studio to studio. Find the new Envoy Pro FX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Michael Brauer, joining us from his studio. And we'll just keep jumping in with some more questions. Here's one from Bryce Luther, who says, I'd love to know how he sets those 1176 on his rear bus. What does he start with? Does he get them pumping with fast attack, release, high ratio, and then dial it in? Or is there a go-to place to start? I've been using the Dr. Pepper setting as my initial setting and then adjusting from there.
I don't put them on rear buses. They're sends.
Okay.
So my stereo send, is one goes to the 11.7 left, coming back on the left, and the other one is pan to the right. It's going to the right, and I can pan, between the two or down the middle, whatever. And the actual setting, if you just go to my website under calibrations, you'll see the setup.
And I would guess, based on what you were saying before, that the settings are just, again, you being playful with it until you arrive at something that feels pretty good to you and you want to use it.
It's a straight up setting. It's a calibration. You have to be exact. It has to be exact. And with the hardware, it's really tricky. With the software, you have to be able to choose. I think the UAD, maybe Chris. I think Chris's does it also, from Waves. But you have to be able to put the British setting in, where it's either, I usually do the top and the bottom ratios. Others put all of them in. I think there's a sound difference. It's an attack difference, but who knows? I'm not going to get into the debate whether it does or doesn't. I use the top and the bottom, works for me. You think it doesn't make a difference? Good for you. But you have to calibrate it a certain way so it reacts, because it's going to be a left and a right. So if you don't do it right, and you put, let's say, a kick down the middle of it or a vocal, you're sending to both left and right. And if it isn't calibrated correctly, you're going to have a left heavy or a right heavy, vocal or instrument. So it needs to, as you're testing it, it needs to react exactly the same way. But it's going to have a certain, well, the great thing with hardware is it has a tone difference between the two. I never found two that matched exactly, which is good, but you have to do the calibration, and that setup is on my site under Q&A.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I know you've covered the ABCD setup topic a lot of times.
Yeah, so I don't really want to go through that again.
That's all right. Thanks for touching on it for us. So let's see what I want to ask you about that. You're talking about the hardware, and we're talking about your setup now being in the box or hybrid. Jim Salvito said, he just made a comment. He said he's all in the box now. I think he sold all his gear. So
not all of it.
Okay, there you go. But are you doing the compressors continue to be out of the box, or you found that staying in the box works for a big part of the routing?
Oh, I had no choice. I could not get that rack of hardware down into my basement. No, for the past year, I had already been learning how to mix completely in the box as far as the major ABCD. And, I kept tweaking, and, Fernando would try something and I'd listen to it and I'd tweak it or not like it and change something else, to the point where my ABCD are, the multi-bus are sounding great. There's no compromise there. And
that's cool.
And that's a combination of stuff I've gotten from UAD or waves, whatever compressors really were able to emulate what I had that was hardware.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we look forward to, learning more about that.
Let me just, I know the questions are always around, well, what is Brauerize, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let me try to be as clear about it in as few words as possible. Because this is, I did a tape op. I did one 14 years ago, and I did one in the last year or two where Larry actually interviewed me. And because I said, Larry, it's time to update what I did, what I spoke about so many years ago, plus something very important had been left out of that interview. So, and he was like, great idea. And he came by and we talked about it. And it was really good. And it shows at that point, I was already in hybrid. And so there's a whole complete diagram of this approach in the hybrid approach. And so you can just take that and apply it to in the box. I'm not ready to tell you all my little doodads, it's not that I have a secret. It's like, just figure it out on your own. It's like, do it your way.
It's like you got the present for Christmas, so you get to play with it for a little while before the rest of us do, right?
Yeah. And plus, like anything, the first article I did, I'd already been doing this for 10 years before I opened up about it and shared it. And it was another 14 years before I really, opened up again and, really updated it. And, the next one won't be 14 years, but the next one will be, the whole approach on in the box. But whether it's analog, all analog or hybrid or in the box, the concepts never change. And so let me just describe quickly, right? For Brauerize, I use 5 buses, 4 processed, 1 is unprocessed. And I use 6 auxes, just like I did on the desk, 1 stereo aux and 5 mono sends. And those 5 mono sends are going to compressors. And to accomplish my multi-bus technique, that's what I do. And the combination of the buses and the auxes is what makes this technique unique. Because in of itself, nothing I did, I invented. Right? There was always multi-bus out there. There was always send returns. There was always parallel. It's just the combination of the two to allow the mixer to be more dynamic and to address all different styles of music coming at him or her. That's what became unique about it. And so the function of the multi-buses is to avoid having one instrument or a group of instruments adversely affect the level or the sound of another single or group of instruments. Meaning that originally I would be mixing everything in basically in pre-compression, because this whole approach is about mixing in post-compression, not pre-compression. Pre-compression is when you put something across the insert and you can compress all you want, and then whether you put the fader up or down doesn't matter, it's compressed. Post-compression is when as you put the fader up, it's going to a compressor, and if you don't put it up enough, it's not going to trigger the compressor. If you put it way too much, it's going to slam it, and your sound is going to be small, right? So I learned, it's a long story, but basically I came to the conclusion that the approach I had learned wasn't going to work for me anymore, which you can imagine is a pretty frightening experience. That I couldn't always, not that it wouldn't ever work for me, but that I couldn't always rely on that approach forever. I needed to come up with something different. I had no idea at the time that, I think I'll come up with post-compression. I had no idea the difference between the two. None of that matter to me. But what I ended up coming up with turned out to be mixing in post compression, and it became much more dynamic, but the window was smaller of finding that spot. And so the difference is that when I was mixing everything, there was one compressor that was just smacking everything. And if I wanted way more bottom end, it affected the vocal. If I wanted more vocal, it kind of brought the bass down. It was just, I didn't know how to find a happy place like that. And it was always compressor. Everybody had to share that kind of approach, that compression. And it was, so by having sub stereos, you can have the drums and the bass find a real sweet spot in your compression. It's going through a compressor, it's hitting really nice. And then no matter what you do with the guitars or the vocal, it's not going to affect that sweet spot because the guitars are going into another sub stereo. And so, when people say, oh yeah, Brauer does he what do they say? He says, yeah, he does multi-bus where he's compressing the bottom end and the mid-range and the top end differently or something. I was like, no, the mid-range, the middle of the record is the guitars. The middle of the record is going to its own processor. The bottom of the record doesn't mean bottom end. The bottom of the record, the anchor of the record, is the drums and the bass. The drums have full bandwidth. It's not like there's no top end on it. So that doesn't make any sense. It's just the bottom of the record. And then the top of the record doesn't mean top end. It means that what's floating on top, like the strings and anything that's sustaining and the vocal that's driving the song. They all have full bandwidth. It's just where in the record is their importance. So that's what the multi-bus compression is about. And so you got the function of the multi-buses, right? Like I said before, so avoid having one instrument or a group of instrument adversely affect the level or sound of another single, right? So that no matter what you got going on the drums and the bass, you get that sweet spot, and then you add guitar, is not going to mess with it. And then the function of the multiple auxes that I have, that's to generate the tone, the fatness, the attitude, and urgency to a sound, right? So when I'm talking about those 1176s, when you calibrate them right and you send, you got the guitar going to C, but then you want a little more fatness, a little more attitude on the left and the right. So then you send maybe the guitar that's panned to the left, you send a little bit of the 1170s, you send it to the 1176s, and it doesn't make it louder necessarily. It just makes it fuller or more exciting, right? Because the compressor is on a British mode, and that thing is wacky. It is crazy, right? And so it adds this natural excitement to it, and you haven't done anything. You're not riding the fader or anything. It's just doing it. It's having fun. It's all about fun. Right?
Yeah.
It's fun. You can't be sitting there all serious and shit. I mean, it's like, it's music.
It's fun actually to hear you describe the way you make records and the excitement that you feel making them, because I'm just reminded sometimes we get caught in that difference between like when we're making music and it's just a fucking blast versus when we're like trying to put on our science coat and brain and work on music, and just feels like all the struggle comes from trying too hard to work on the music, and all the really fun stuff and the stuff that comes back to impress you later is the stuff where you just have fun. You just make music like you picked up a guitar and banged out a chord.
Yep. And look, trust me, we all know that not every mix comes up and is a happy mix. There's some that are unbelievably challenging, and it is stressful, and you get angry. I mean, I will get up, I'll slam the desk and I'll walk out and I'll get it out. I'll just get really, really pissed off because I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it to a place I want to be, which is why I'm getting angry, and you have to let yourself do that. Get angry, get it out, then come back and sit down and try it again, and just keep doing it. It's going to come together, but you have to know, why is it not coming together? Because the certain feel you're trying to get accomplished isn't coming. Not because you don't get the right EQ. I don't give a shit about that. I give it, the importance for me is, why can I not get this happy enough or sad enough or angry enough? Why? And sometimes it's technical because the engineering of the record is in such the wrong direction, and you got to turn it around. And okay, well, there are records like that. And so that part of it isn't fun. But once you get to that point where you go, I'm in, then take a little break and then revert back to why you love what you do, which is to have fun. And now you're going to raise the level of that mix because you've survived it. You've met the challenge. You're there now. You're back to, and that's what is important to remember. Now you're back to be able to mix again and not think about it. Because up until then, there were things that were forcing you to address a challenge, to address a problem. And so once you've addressed it, you have to get back into the mode of having fun again. And a lot of people never get to that mode because they're too tired. They're exhausted. So, okay, then take a break. Give yourself a break. You're not a robot. You're a human being. And some of you are going to be way more emotional than others. And it's okay. I mean, that's what happens. This is how you can end up with a crazy, dynamic song, and that was painful. Not every song is easy to mix. Some of them, the journey you have to go through is unbelievable. But when you get to the end, it's great. And that's happened to me hundreds of times. And it's just, I'm okay with that because I know that I'm not going to give up. I was a bike racer for years. And if I had to go up this mountain, and the incline was like, 10, 12%. I mean, of course, they could also go up to 14 or 18. But man, I was just like, I just focus. I go, I know it hurts. But when I get to the top, I'm going to feel so much better. And do I want to get off the bike now? Yeah, my brain's screaming, my legs are screaming, get off, stop the pain, and I'm like, you can get off. And then the other part says, no, man, no way, man. If I quit once, I'll quit twice. And that's the kind of thing with a mix. It's like, it's going to be okay. Don't quit. Because if you quit, then the next time you won't know what it feels like to get over that hump, to meet it. And you won't have that confidence that is possible because you won't have that reference anymore because you stopped and you quit. And the bottom line is, just remember this. This is what used to be in my head. I'm telling you, for years, whenever I would get to a point in a mix, I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. Or somebody would ask something of me, the producer or the artist. I always imagined there were 4 guys outside the control room sitting on a couch, literally sitting on a couch, all there, very quiet. And any one of those 4 mixers could get up, get into my room, have me move over, and they would make it happen.
But technically, they're not allowed to come in if you take a dinner break, they're not allowed to come in, right? That's okay.
They were these virtual 4 great mixers, and any one of them could do what I said can't be done. And I know that's a fact. And so I always kept that in check. Like, I don't think you'll ever hear anybody I've worked with said, "Oh, Brauer said, I can't do that." The only time that would happen is when there was every option was absolutely had been tried. And it was like, I think you're going to have to replay this because the performance isn't, I just can't pull out any more tricks out of the magic bag on this. I think you have to redo the performance or something. But it was very rare. I mean, if I felt that word ever came out of my mouth, it was not a good feeling for me. It was not a good time. I really felt, those are the times where I felt total failure. But I knew that I would have tried every possible that experience that I have. And I'll tell you, it didn't stop me from actually even calling a friend. I would call a friend who I know, was great at particular guitar sound or something. And I would call him and I go, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. I just don't have anything more in my arsenal. And then they call me and go, all right, get this piece of gear, that piece of gear, and then do this and do that. Here's the EQ settings. Go. And they saved my ass. So, it's okay to also call a friend, and don't worry about your ego, man. Everybody's in it. Everybody's experienced this. Nobody is void of that. Nobody's perfect. So you do what you got to do, because why? Because it's in the interest of the song, not in the interest of your ego. It's in the interest of the song that you just do what you got to do. And why do you, why not quit? Because when this turns out great, this song is going to sound wonderful, and maybe millions of people will hear it.
Well, I think with all the times that you've pushed through and you've, gotten over the peak like that, it probably makes it so that when you show up at a project and it looks like it might be incredibly challenging, you're just not breaking a sweat at the beginning, like maybe the first time you approach something like that.
I might very well be breaking a sweat. I might go to the bathroom and puke. No, none of that's avoided. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, I do find a calm. I'll go to a calm place in me because I have the confidence that, I can do this. So I may feel nervous at first, but I know that I know what it's like to get to the top of that hill, right? And I know it. I've done it many, many times, and I draw on that. If all I have to draw on are the times that I quit, then I'm going to walk in and screw it, and the people will see it on my face, right? They'll see it.
Yeah.
You'll look like a deer in headlights.
Making sure your vocal sounds amazing in your mix starts with capturing your voice perfectly. This means controlling sibilants and plosives at the mic. Back when I started out, we used to make pop filters out of pantyhose and a wire hanger, but not only did it not look good or smell great, but it also didn't sound all that great either. There's a reason that the Beastie Boys said they never rocked the mic with the pantyhose. Fortunately, pop filters have come a long way in the studio, and Jay-Z Mics brings you the ultimate pop filter, built from solid metal parts that won't break and a flexible gooseneck for easy placement. The Jay-Z pop filter uses a unique waveguide design that prevents plosives from getting through to the mic while letting important high frequencies through for clarity. Get your vocals just right and use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 20% off the amazing pop filter at jzmic.com. It would be hard to describe in one sentence what gives records a legendary sound, but it would be easy to describe in 3 letters: API. For more than 50 years, API Audio has created large format consoles for world-class studios. Famous for co-founder Saul Walker's circuit designs and the original 2520 op-amp, the sound of API consoles is the sound of great music. API now brings that legendary sound to your home studio with the Box, a small format console featuring the famous API circuitry that is the perfect analog addition to your digital studio. The Box gives you 8 recording channels on the left with built-in mic pre's, high-pass filters, direct inputs, and customizable 500 module slots, and 16 summing channels on the right. Or you can mix using all 24 channels, including aux sends, inserts, and silky smooth faders. API now offers a virtual console experience with a personalized online demo of the Box, 16 16082 or 2448 consoles. Sign up for your demo now at apiaudio.com. Why don't we talk about that for a sec? You talk about being in a place of calm. I know you had discussed, sort of discovering the power of transcendental meditation. I wondered if you wanted to just talk about any of that stuff, or if any of that, ways that you felt like that's either just informed your life or informed the music you're making.
I think meditation in general, whether you choose TM or any of the other ones that are out there, for me, I always felt that music was my meditation. I don't need anything else. But the truth is that there is life outside of mixing. And I always felt, wow, I am in such a beautiful place when I'm mixing. You hear musicians talk about this, where they're just so happy when they're performing because they go to this beautiful place. And yet, when the gig is over, they go back to, their what's going on in their life, and they can't draw that same way in other aspects of their life. And that's where the conflict begins. And that's where sometimes the depression sets in, because you can't apply that necessarily to other parts in your personal life. And I seem to have been dealing with it fine, but it was getting harder and harder and harder. And I think since I was a teenager, my mother always said, "Darling, you've got to do yoga and meditation." And I go, yeah. And always, yeah. But she would never let up on that, not to be annoying, but she just never let up on that. I go, yeah. I'll do it. And then I would hear about different forms of meditation. I was like, those just don't do it for me, And there was a point where things just felt really, really hollow inside. That's the best way I could describe it. And I was like, I am searching for happiness in all the wrong places. I knew it. I knew that it comes from within, but I was like, and everything just seemed more and more intense. And people could feel I was, look, I'm emotional and I'm sensitive to stuff, but there was an intensity that people would often associate with, when I'd be too passionate for a song or a mix or so on and so forth, which is a whole other story. But there's a point where I was just finishing up a record with Bongiovi, and we were listening back to a song, which is, and he took a deep breath and let it out, which is actually completely unrelated to TM. You can do breathing exercise, but that's not what you're taught. That's not part of it. The important thing is just the way the meditation is done. And I looked at it and I was like, speaking of a deep breath, do you recommend anybody who teaches meditation? I don't know why I said that, but I did. And he was like, well, actually, since the last record, I started doing TM. Transcendental meditation. I was thinking to myself, God, I heard about that years ago. I thought it was some cult thing. It's like, he goes, I can give you the name of my teacher. And I said, okay, all right. And I had all these hesitations about, and these ideas of what any meditation involves, like you got to sit in a certain position and you have to control your mind, and your mind is a monkey, and you got to clear
your mind
it.
Is a monkey.
And you have to focus on something, and you have to have incense and pictures, and you have to repeat something out loud a million times. I was like, man, this is I don't want any of that. I don't want to believe. I don't have to believe in it. I don't want it to be a religion. I don't have to be paying 10% of my income. I don't want any of this stuff. And so anyway, I texted Bon Jovi's teacher, Mario Orsatti, and we set up a time 2 weeks after I texted him, and I went in, and it was, I kind of told him, I said, do I have to play tambourine? Do I have to, do I have to burn incense and show pictures?
Don't you mean, do you get to play a tambourine? Is that what you meant? With a lot of mid-range and clarity.
I don't want to do any of that stuff. He goes, you don't even have to believe in it, Michael. It's transcendental. It's the oldest form of meditation, and it has more science studies with TM than any other form of meditation. And what they've seen with it is really outstanding, and it's proven. It's so. I'm like, well, all right, let me, go ahead. I mean, I'll go ahead and try it. And it was 4 90-minute sessions. And the first one got me worried, because I was like, all right, so there's no pictures and no incense. And the first thing when I go into the room and we're talking, there's a picture of the Maharishi, and there's a little incense burning, and there's a flower. And then he starts saying, this whole, it's a long, long ceremonial, and he's speaking in one of the Indian languages, and I was like, oh, great, this is everything I don't want. And I guess he could read my mind. He goes, you'll never see this again. This is ceremonial. We're just celebrating the fact that the Maharishi brought this meditation to the public after it's 4,000 years old. This was the first meditation. And Maharishi was a physicist. It's not like he was some, voodoo guy. He was just, he discovered it was all based in science, because he comes from science. So, anyway, quickly, within the first session, because it has to be 4 in a row, I was like, wow, this reminds me of what it's like when I'm mixing. That place I go to, I couldn't believe it. And it happened so quickly and so naturally. It was like, now remember, you can have no expectations. Don't expect anything. And, I was given a mantra, and it's like, keep this quiet to yourself. And you repeat it, but it becomes like, almost like a thought. It can be distorted. You can use part of it. It just becomes like this thing that just sits in there. And you do it twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, and mornings kind of sets up the day. And then the evening one, early evening, is before dinner and stuff, kind of just absorbs everything that's happened during the day. And man, it's been 2 years. I was like, wow, it has really changed my life. It really allowed me to be in this place where I can think through things a bit easier. It's hard. I don't want to spend too much more time on it, but it's like, it doesn't, you just let the mind do its thing. And then you just kind of say the mantra inside you. And then you kind of dip down and you come back up, you dip down, you come back up. Sometimes you feel like nothing happened in that 20 minutes. And other times you go, wow, that was great. But the next one might be totally different. Every day is different. And all I can say is that for me, this is what I needed. And those who I speak to about it, and they've done different meditations, some of them, and then they ended up with TM. It's just like, it changed my life. And I always hear that same, it changed my life. Those 4 words, I go, come on, give me a break. And until I was like, oh, I see what they're talking about, So everybody's different. And when do you need it? I mean, I think, man, if I had started this when I was 18, when my mother actually said, darling, you should do meditation. Now, her meditation is different, and I don't, it works great for her, but, regardless, if I had started that, I'd be I'd be very curious as to where I am now, because I've had success. I've been very successful without having done the meditation, but it's not just about success in your music. It's success around everything. And one of the things that I discover is how much more creative and imaginative that I would get. Like I'm not forcing anything, but suddenly these crazy ideas start to come up because I'm not filtering, I'm not forcing anything. And then like, whoa, that was so cool. And then, and then I go, I got to try that today. And it's just, and things I haven't thought about. I'm a fixer, in my house, everything. I love to fix things. And I'll be sitting there and out of nowhere, the solution to a problem of fixing something in the house suddenly pops up. I go, oh, I got to do that. It's like, I don't know where that came from, but I start to laugh, and those are the kind of unexpected things that can happen. So enough of that. Just saying that whatever you choose, I mean, you were telling me that you started doing meditation. It's a different form, and it really helped you. And I think, there's three things that got to go on. One, you need to be physically healthy, and you have to be mentally healthy. You can't be mentally healthy and then physically sick, because that's going to affect your mental. And so you need to be a balance of the two. And as you guys all know, when you're sitting there mixing for, all day long and there's no windows and you're kind of crouched over, you need something that is you need to be physical. I mean, I was a bike racer for years. So for me, a balance of being alone in a room, focusing on music, and then the opposite of being part of a team and the strategy to win that race. And it was like a chess game all the time. I love that contrast, right? And our team did great. I mean, we were local. I never was professional. I was amateur, but we won series. We won a lot of races, and people knew when we showed up, oh boy.
And Lance Armstrong hasn't shown up in your studio to start up his music career yet or anything yet?
No, he hasn't, but he's got all his contacts and stuff.
Right on, man.
So it's, it's, yeah.
What about now? I mean, are you still riding a lot, or do you have any other advice for people when because I do think that the health, physical balance to the studio life is super critical in my opinion. Yeah. And it doesn't always get talked about.
No, I still ride. I mean, during the summer, I'm not going to race anymore. At least I'm not planning on it unless I really 100% focus on that again. But that would be, I'd want to go something really big. And, but obviously not, it's a young man's game, right? I mean, they retire by the time they're in their mid 30s, but I still bike, and I still in a way train, I'm not trying to, I know how to get stronger during the season, and, I focus on it. I'm not just bopping around. I mean, I have plans, and then I have certain goals I'm trying to set, and speeds, and I've got a power, meter, and I can see what, how I'm improving and what I need to work on. And during the winter, I have a wind trainer, but also I ski.
Oh, cool.
So I'm in the Catskills, so I'm near a couple of mountains, and so I'm skiing, and it feels good. I need that, because when you're feeling stressed, well, you can't just sit there and just stew. You got to get out there, get on the bike, wear it off, or run. If you're a runner, run. And if you're, whatever sport keeps you, keeps your health and your mental, it's so important. You can't just put everything in just doing music. That's not to say you in the first 10 years of your career, you're going to sacrifice a lot, but you can't, you got to respect the body, keep the body healthy.
Yeah.
Out
Atom Audio designs monitors with a mission to bring accuracy, transparency, and high definition to your studio, guiding you each step of the way on your journey from starting out in a home studio to installing your ultimate mixing setup in your pro studio. Check out their complete line of speakers and headphones, from the T-Series to the AX Series to their top-of-the-line S-Series, which all use the unique ART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that lets your speakers disappear into your music. Won't it feel awesome to make brilliantly accurate, creative decisions in your mixes because you can finally hear your music clearly? Your ears are the greatest instrument you have, and if you can hear the music, then you can mix the music. Learn how to set up your studio monitors and control room for great sound, plus lots of other cool studio tips at atom-audio.com/education.
You know, mastering is a guilty pleasure. It's been phenomenal to hear a client tell me that the master wasn't just perfect, but it was right. It connected. I love assisting with the mixing process by giving free feedback just because, you know, if the mix feels some positive impact from my input, frankly, it'll be easier to master. At least 50% of the mastering is preparing the mix. If the mix is really good, most of the mastering is already done. It's much more of a conversation now from end to end. It shouldn't be a black art that's hidden behind closed doors. Shouldn't be a one-shot deal either. Even after the master is delivered, we can still work on it. We can even go back and make mix changes later and update the master for a fraction of the cost. That's the iterative master. I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. Let's talk about how I can help elevate your mix into the best master possible. Contact me and get free feedback on your mix or a free master demo at soundporter.com.
Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Want to start mastering your own records? Rockstars of Mastering walks you through exactly how I mastered my own record using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. Want to learn how to create a mix that doesn't suck but rocks instead? At Mixmaster Bundle, I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins so that you can have punchy, powerful drums, guitars that rock, bass you can feel, and a mix that is in your face. Plus, it's totally free as my way of saying thanks for listening. Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now and look for the clickable link in the show notes below. Was that partly what drew you to the south of France for Mix with the Masters? Was your interest in biking and Tour de France, or am I just looking for connections?
No, it was a French guy wrote me, Maxime, and he was a young engineer at the time, and he wrote me and asked if he could intern for me. I was at Electric Lady, and so I said, well, I can get you an internship there, but, you know, you'll be working for them and then for Electric, and then, you know, if there's time available or something, you can hang out. And that's what he did. And I grew up in France, so he spoke English fine, but growing up in France, I had, you know, that connection. And then when the summer ended, he contacted me a couple months later about maybe doing a seminar. And his father, Hervé, owns a great residential studio called La Fabrique, and down in the south of France. And one thing led to another, and I was like, maybe I'll do that. I had never spoken for more than 2 hours, and suddenly I was doing a week-long seminar. But I felt that this was a good time because the idea of passing on your knowledge from engineer to assistant, that oral history of, you know, had stopped years ago because most studios no longer had staff engineers. That had stopped probably around 78, 79. It was mostly now just staff assistants. And I felt that this, and I always trained, I continued it by training one guy for several years, but that's not enough, you know, to be able to maybe, you know, show 15 or 20 people during a week, you know, what you do and my philosophy was going to be, nobody cares about the technique. It's about how do you think? That's what they want to know. That's what they're going to go home with, is why am I using this tool? well, I'm using this tool to express something I have in me, and that's unique to me. And you can be unique to you, and those are the things that I had a little index card with like the basics of up until then, as a mixer, you never articulate why you think what you think. You just do. It's quiet inside. You're not talking to anybody. You're like, and now I do this because of that. You don't know why you're doing anything. You're just doing it. And I had to articulate why. That was a pretty scary transition for me. But I learned, and I became much better at it over the years. But and so that's what I did for the first week. And I had my buddy David Kahn, who's also came in and shared a week with me. And then we talked about it, and we said, they said, can you want to continue this? And I was like, let's just see how this goes first. And I was like, I'm pretty happy with it. I said, maybe I'll call my friends. And so I called Manny, I called Tony, I called Chris, and then they trusted me because, we get offers all the time, and we don't usually return them because we just know there's nothing behind it. And so they trusted me because I said, look, it's me. Trust me. I think this could be really cool. And I described the philosophy behind it. This wasn't going to be like a class and you talk about technique and everybody has a quiz. There's going to be none of that. It's going to be share your philosophy. Be honest. Don't hold anything back. Don't worry about the secrets, because if they're not creative, they're not going to be able to use your techniques and your ideas. You have to be creative to begin with. And then I also said, look, they can't be beginners. It has to be working engineers. Otherwise, you're going to have half the group bored and the other group lost.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a few things I put into place, and it became more and more popular. And 10 years later, I'm moved on now. I'm not involved in the day-to-day decisions that they're making and stuff. But there's other, I was very exclusive all those years, but I'm no longer. So now I'm, other challenges, other things I want to do, which I couldn't do unless I,
Yeah, it's like your mix. You described your changing everything up every 5 years,
Yeah.
That's what life is, right?
Yeah, that's how life is. So, it's cool. And I recommend it for those. And also, if you can't afford to attend these 1 week sessions, is also to just subscribe and you'll see, all of us have done videos where is really, really cool videos. I mean, you can learn so much from these videos, and I've gotten, obviously I like mine, and I think I have an easy way of explaining things. I don't go technical. So it's easier for pretty much anybody to understand what I'm doing. And, but you got my favorites. You got Chad in there. You got Andy Wallace. You got Chris. You got his brother, Tom, you name it. I mean, there's just so many great videos. And you pick the guys that you like the best, and then boom, you can watch a video and see how they approach a song. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, that's so instructive and educational, and and they're not the only ones doing that. You got Pure Mix that does it too.
Mm-hmm.
And Fab does a great job. So, I mean, you have so much access. Back in the day, the only way you'd learn this is from getting a job in a recording studio and interning, which I still believe is
still not a bad way to go.
Essential, because you're not going to learn interpersonal communication. You're not going to learn how to, work with an artist and a client by watching videos. You need to live it, and you need to know how hard it is and how much you want it. You won't know how much you want it unless you feel the pain of being an intern.
Yeah, there's a level of stress that accompanies a session that is totally appropriate. Obviously, there are levels that are inappropriate, but I remember, learning the importance of what we were doing just by being in the hot seat and learning from my mentor, Brad Jones, when he was teaching me all these things and understanding how critical the little details are in the session, because because otherwise you don't want to get in the way of the music. You want to help the music. You want to.
Yeah. And by watching the engineer, you're going to see all types of scenarios take place when there's a conflict between artist and producer, artist and engineer. And in the beginning, you only have like a couple of scenarios on how to deal with it and come out looking good, right? And so there's a good chance that you're going to pick the scenario that is going to have him walking out and never wanting to come back again because you don't know how to deal with this situation. This guy could be like seriously demanding, and you might consider him an asshole. Well, he doesn't consider himself an asshole. He's just feeling like you're not listening, or you're not on par with how he likes to be treated, and maybe you're judging him, and they objected. Usually the ones who are seriously demanding don't want to be judged. They just want you to accept their approach and do the job well. And so when you don't know how to handle that, you're going to end up with a unhappy client. And all this is word of mouth. So by watching an engineer, an experienced engineer, handle these different situations, that's where the learning happens. And what I do with my assistants back when people attended sessions, if there was a situation after it was over, I'd sit down with my assistant and I would analyze what just happened. I go, okay, here's a situation, right? And you saw that it could become really intense. And you probably were wondering how I was going to handle that. And so let's talk about that. This is how I handled it. And did you notice that? And you go, yeah, I go, okay. And then if maybe something didn't turn out good, I go, okay, see where my mistake was? My mistake was right here at that point where I said this, and I should have let that go, and I should have done that, and then that could have been better. But that's a learning experience too. And I look at them, I go, you see, I think I screwed that up. And I could have handled it better. And so, I'm verbalizing something, an event that had happened during the day. And that's how these guys learn. It's not just about how to get a good drum sound. It's just like, well, how to get a drum sound when, the artist has certain visions that's different than the producer. And how do you get in the middle of that without alienating? That doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it's learning how to get a great drum sound or any kind of sound when almost universally in every session there's something that's trying to get in your way.
It could be
learning the skill of the workaround where you can go around the obstacle and keep moving forward.
When you're trying to mix a song and you've got 5 serious egos in the room, how do you come up with a great mix?
Yeah,
that's experience. That is experience. That's why, guys like there's so many great. I mean, like Ed Cherney, who passed away. He was just absolutely great at that. And well, you name it. I mean, there's just so many. The great engineers. What people don't understand is like, you might say, "Oh, I could have mixed this song better as well," dude. I doubt it. I doubt you would have lasted an hour because you had no idea. You had no idea the circumstances under which he or she mixed that great song.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you wouldn't have lasted a minute. I know this, right? So it's not just about, I'll just balance and I'm going to be great. No, there's people that say, I don't like what you just did. And then the other person goes, well, I liked what he did. And well,
can you go back to 2 times ago, the thing you did 3 times ago?
Yeah, that's what people don't hear when they're listening to a mix they're enjoying, or they're trying to, oh, I could do this better. I'm like, well, maybe you could have. Let's recreate the exact situation under which I did that mix. And that's not meant as an excuse. I don't walk there going, I could have mixed this better if. No way. It's done. If I'm not proud of it, then that's my problem. I'm not going to walk away going, it could have been. Life is too short for that. And then what are you going to cough every time somebody hears that mix?
Michael, can I give you a few more questions as we close out the podcast interview?
Let's do it.
All right. So this was just a comment. This comes from Jared Shade Reynolds, who just says he described you as a great dude and a whole lot of fun to work with, which I think you're giving us evidence of that right now, talking about making records and what you put into it. So here's one from Mike Guidotti. How about some advice for mid-level people wanting to break into mixing in 2021? And Michael, what do you think about the post-pandemic audio job landscape? What do you imagine it might look like?
Well, what?
Any response is good for us, man.
4 words. I have no fucking idea. I don't know where we're going with this. What I do know is that people like myself and others have learned that you can do a lot with little.
Yeah.
And that Zoom, TeamViewer, audio movers.
Yeah, audio movers, yeah.
That is the way of life. And look, my assistant is in New York City. He's on every day. I've got TeamViewer and audio movers and FaceTime. And so he's as well as he could be here. It doesn't matter to me. He doesn't have to be here. Plus, I don't have all the analog gear, so he doesn't have to be here to take notes, right? I mean, that's also a great advantage. That one of the reasons why he had to be in the studio is for post-mixing production, right? He doesn't have to do that. And but he's there every day, and he's right there. I can just talk to him. I can ask him questions, or I want to try something. He can do it for me. If there's, DS the vocal, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go upstairs and get a sandwich. DS the vocal, or do this, or try this idea, try that idea. I'll be back down in 10 minutes. So that really wasn't taking place back in beginning of March. So we've learned, and same with musicians who are, they're playing in different parts of the world, and they're all syncing together and they're playing. So things can be done. Fortunately, this happened when technology is there. We have TeamViewer. We have audio movers, right? We have the technology is in place to allow us to be isolated yet together. And so what's going to come out of that? Well, people will have decided that they could be self-sufficient, that maybe they're not going to be so needy as they used to be. I certainly hope that doesn't mean that nobody wants to do a session together in the same room anymore. I mean, that would suck. But
I was going to make a joke about maybe people haven't been listening to each other anyway.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I don't see a substitute for people playing face to face in a studio.
There's a vibe, there's a thing. But you know what? They've been able to do it in isolation. And that's a great thing. And I think, where people have upped the game now that of their ability to not be deterred, because despite all of this, people are still making good music, and I can still mix a song, and I've got my assistant because I have access. I don't have to have him here. I don't need that. If I ever move back to a studio in the city, then he'll show up, but I don't need that. And I have everything I need, and I'm not compromising. feel my mixing is as good as ever. And if it isn't, it's not because of the gear, it's because of me.
Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. When you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then get started at ultimatemixingmasterclass.com. So, Michael, TeamViewer, when you refer to that, if I understand correctly, you're saying that one of the methods that seems to work is for somebody to maybe remote control your computer and assist in that way and hear the audio over audio movers, as opposed to having matching sessions in two locations all the time? Or am I asking the wrong question? Is it like, doesn't really matter and all those tools are the way to go?
Look, I want my assistant present, right? So how am I going to be present? Well, he's going to be hearing when I'm mixing in real time. And if I turn to him and I go, "What's this click?" Or what just happened here? This is a glitch or something. He's there. He's got his headphones on. He's listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't have to have FaceTime. I can have him facing the wall or something, so he doesn't. I don't feel like he's looking at me all the time. But but he's hearing and he has control. If I say, "Hey, work on the de-essing or something," he's in my computer. He's controlling my computer, right? So he can do the work. There's a little bit of a delay, but it doesn't matter. He's doing certain things that don't need riding up and down, and he could, if it really need to, he can do level, but he can't ride a fader because there's too much of a delay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't require him to do that. So it makes it extremely beneficial for me that I can still do my work and I still have an assistant.
That's
for
very
those
cool.
who need assistant. Most of you guys do everything on your own. You prep the session, you're mixing it, then you do the post, and then you're doing all the comments, and you're doing, the saving, and you're doing 100% of the work. Most of you guys are probably doing it that way. I've had the luxury of being able to have an assistant and I'm also training. It's not like a one-way street here. Fernando's been with me for 4 or 5 years now, and he's gotten amazing. But that was, that's one-on-one kind of stuff, and we're breaking in a new guy, Noah, and he's going to be great too. He went to Syracuse, and he's, real musical. And so there's the advantage. And so what's the landscape going to look like when we're all said and done? I think that the music is going to change, and it's going to be probably extremely joyous in a sense. It's going to be quite dynamic. It's going to be the opposite of what they've had to, endear in a sense, and be forced to produce. And now there's going to be a reflection on that. A lot of, I don't know that anybody is safe from knowing a family member or a good friend that has either been sick or died. I've just recently, for me, the circle between March and now, the circle has gotten so close that I am directly affected by someone in the family who has not only had COVID, but passed away from it. And so we're all, pretty much the planet It's one of those sci-fi movie. You'd see those movies back then and you go, oh, yeah, right. The whole planet. It's like the whole planet trying to, fight an alien attack. Except this was an alien attack, through a virus. And it's just like a, Japanese sci-fi, except, there's no gorilla or Godzilla. It's in the form of a virus that is not going away.
Well, they say
Weird,
that great technologies have always appeared during wartime and through military and things like that. I can't list them all, but I've certainly been familiar with that. I think, tape came from World War II, and 30 Epps tape came from the Nazis even, and it's like this is a form of a war that the world has been waging. And so some of these technologies that will come out of it will probably stick with us and be pretty remarkable, So
well, I think
I'm excited about what's next with music production and making music. I know a lot of people say that, things change and focus on the loss of something from the past, but I get excited about what the future holds.
I do too. I mean, something good will happen. I don't quite know what it is, but if you think about when, after World War II or after the Vietnam War or after any big war, what happens to the culture? What are the things that are a result of that particular war, or what's the result of this particular disease that's forced people to be inside and to still be creative? This has not stopped those who want to be creative. It's actually allowed them to focus more on their creativity because they don't have the distractions of being in a social setting and other things that could just continue to, delay their development of certain ideas. And here you're kind of stuck in that. And so those who choose to make the best of it are going to come out of this great. Those who don't will have wasted many, many months that something good could have happened. I, for myself, didn't sit around. I was like, I took advantage of this, and I really, really developed my in the box now, and I'm just as strong about it as anyone else. And but there was a big fear about doing that. There's a fear that people say, "Oh, wow, he's selling all his gear. He must be retired, or he's broke, or it's like." I called a couple of good buddies of mine because they had already done this way before me, moved into the box. And I spoke to Nico Bolas, and who still does console and stuff. And I mean, they all do, but they're primarily able to do stuff in the box. And I spoke to Andrew Sheps for a while, and I was like, how do is this okay? I mean, I want to do this, but everybody knows my racks, and they're like, Brauer, it's the pilot, man. You know this, the pilot. And I was like, yeah, I know, but, so we're all human. We all have, our fears, our goals, our wants. And those are all, these are all things that happen when you're put into a situation where it accelerates your decision making. It's like, you may have done this eventually, but now you're forced to do it within months, whatever it is guys are doing. Suddenly you got to build a house quicker, you got to sell the house, or you got to do this, you got to do that, or you got to develop this technique now. You don't have time, you got to do it now. So I think that's those who are, I think it's to a degree, those who have survived it will come out quite well. And then there's others where the tragedy is struck, and it's just horrible. It's horrible, and from a financial standpoint, from a mental, from a physical. I mean, this is a fucking tragedy, but for those who, the best that you can do what you can. And I think that's why, I kind of say that the timing of having started TM a year before this really helped me navigate through this through this period. And that's why I say, I think meditation, life is stressful as it is. And to be able to just kind of give your brain a break, which is what I do. And like 20 minutes, I'm just, it's like, oh, not always, but I mean, I'm just saying I think we all need some of that. We need a good balance of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Michael, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. We are at the end of the podcast, but I do want to ask you one last question. This one's hypothetical, and I like to ask it of all the guests. And we'll go take the Wayback Studio machine, and you go back in time and you find young Michael just starting out in the studio, and you say, listen, dude, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you should know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself early on if you could?
Well, I don't think it would matter because I wouldn't listen. You're going to have to learn it the hard way anyway. When I teach these seminars, I go, look, I've done this and I've done that. I'm telling you guys that I've already been through it and I screwed up. And so here's the reason why, and here's your choice. And, I go, but, you're going to have to learn it on your own. And then you're going to go, wow, I remember now when Brauer said, oh, you shouldn't do that because this is what'll happen, So I wouldn't have listened to my own advice. But I guess and again, I had to learn this the hard way, but you shouldn't be too overly precious over what is not your own creation. It's not your record. You are not the God. You may need to feel like that as you're mixing, but once the mix is kind of done and you're presenting it, you need to get back to this is not your record. And so I think the biggest hurdle that I had was when I became so precious with the mixes that I was presenting that I wasn't listening to what the artist wanted to hear. And so I would say, but that wouldn't have made any sense to me. Because I what do you mean precious? And what do you mean, this is a great, so it's, you have to experience these things on your own. And then hopefully you come out of it with your reputation intact. And then maybe in the back of your mind, you kind of remember as you're heading into that hole, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should listen a little bit more. After all, it's the artist's record, not mine. So that might be the only advice that you might just be paying attention or be aware of when you're going down that road. That's all.
That's great. That's a heavy thought to think of making a career worth of records and not describing them as your own.
They're not my own.
Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us, dude. What an honor to just hang out with you and listen to you tell stories and just talk about this stuff in your totally badass wood-paneled basement studio. I grabbed a little screenshot, so maybe we'll throw a photo of that in there too. Let the rock stars know where they can go find you online. Where would you like them to go learn more about you? You've got your whole Brauerizing technique has been deliberated over and with a fine-tooth comb for many years. So anybody who wants to go learn about that.
Well, you can go to Mix with the Masters, right? And you can go to my site where I have quite an extensive Q&A and interviews. Just about your interview will end up there too. So people can just go back and, listen to anything that I've done socially. And then, like there's Instagram, it's Michael_Brauer_. That's about it. I mean, And then YouTube seems to have a ton of stuff that I've done. And then it's always interesting too. There's people who seem to know everything about Brauerize, and they show their technique. And I've watched some, and they're so wrong, so wrong. And I suggest if you want to learn it from me. I have the videos. I'm also starting. I will be doing my own YouTube channel. It's very early. I'm thinking about it. I want to start doing some stuff there. So be on the lookout. At some point, I might be doing, these little tidbits here and there. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing yet, but you'll hear from me in that respect. It'll get out there.
Right on.
So anyway, just everybody just hang in there, and just, we're all kind of in the same boat, man. And some are doing better than others, and some are not doing so well. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, it was like that way before COVID. Some people are doing better than others, and
right.
Maybe the curve is a little different, the bell, but we're all, we're all dependent on music. And if there's no music, there's no mixing. So just hang in there. This too will pass.
Well, Michael, thank you for joining us. Rockstars, a reminder that we've got links to stuff, to Michael's website, et cetera, and the Spotify playlist. So you can go listen to a massive, extensive discography of great records in the show notes. Just click through. It's on the website. And Michael, I look forward to meeting you in person. Hopefully at the next, AES or NAMM or whatever, I'll wander over to the Mix with the Masters booth.
Well, I may not be there. I may be somewhere else, but I'll be around.
I'll see you walking around. Thanks so much, dude. Cheers.
All right. Great. Bye.
Ciao. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. Sound Porter Mastering, OWC, Atom Audio, API Audio, Spectra 1964, Isotope, and JZ Microphones. Remember to get your free mastering demo at soundporter.com and use the coupon code ROCK10 at Isotope for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your 7-day free subscription trial to get access to lots of their plugins. And use the coupon code ROCKSTARS at jzmic.com for 20% off this very pop filter you're hearing right now for a limited time. You will find links to all these wonderful sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, Hugh McDonald, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. You guys rock. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.